Against film censorship. Aminata Fauna's opposing view was broadcast last night in Don't Look Now. Eyes Wide Open contains some scenes of both a violent and sexual nature.
Good evening. You are an idiot. You are stupid, weak, impressionable, easily led, and unable to distinguish between fiction and reality. If you're an adult, you're probably an immature one, and if you're a parent, you're a very bad one. I, on the other hand, am intelligent, cultured, and sophisticated, parentally adept and able to appreciate art, and eager to prevent you from attempting to do the same thing because, frankly, well, you're just not up to the job. In short, I know what's good for you, and you don't. Now, put like that, it all sounds rather unpleasant, doesn't it? But that's exactly what Britain's film censors are saying to you every day of the week. As a result, you can't currently watch movies like Straw Dogs or Driller Killer in your living room. The seminal shocker The Evil Dead is a couple of minutes shorter than it ought to be wherever you see it. Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer has got some of its scenes put back to front so they don't make sense anymore. And people in sex films don't actually have sex. It's also why The Bad Lieutenant, who's appearing on Channel 4 in about 10 minutes, isn't quite so bad. Now, the basis for all this madness is a peculiarly British fear of freedom and responsibility, a fear which is best expressed in the much-lauded Obscene Publications Act, which outlaws material demonstrating a tendency to deprave or corrupt a significant proportion of its likely audience. Supporters of the OPA applaud the fact that it considers works of art as a whole, examining each element in context and asking what effect does the work in its entirety actually have upon its audience. Now, under current rules, both films and videos are subject to the OPA, and the British Board of Film Classification make it their job to cut or ban any films which may infringe that law. But that's not as simple as it sounds, because obviously the law is open to wide interpretation. A fact dramatically illustrated recently when the then Chief Censor James Furman was publicly chastised by Home Secretary Jack Straw for rubber stamping as OK sex videos like this, which Customs and Excise officials considered obscene. Apparently, Furman had decided that in the 90s, the sight of consenting adults engaging in mutually pleasurable sex was not likely to deprave or corrupt the clientele of licensed sex shops. To him, modern porn videos like this were far less troublesome than, say, age-old problem films like I Spit on Your Grave, a violent thriller which depicts lengthy gang rapes shot with gritty realism. Now, I imagine that many Channel 4 viewers would actually agree with Furman and support the legalisation of consensual porn while still wanting to suppress some more violent material. Indeed, I Spit on Your Grave has long been outlawed in the UK under the terms of the OPA because it allegedly encourages the viewer to revel in the pain and degradation of a woman. But is it really that vile? Well, not according to a surprisingly well-argued essay in this book, published at the height of the video nasties panic of the early 80s, which reads I Spit on Your Grave as a feminist tract, presenting the heroine's suffering not as titillation, but as an unbearable ordeal for the audience, as indeed it should be. Now, I don't know whether I buy this argument, but I do know that I have met many fans of exploitation cinema who hated I Spit on Your Grave precisely because it wasn't any fun at all to watch. It appalled them, but it didn't corrupt them. Now, I also know that I personally loathe Lars von Trier's acclaimed movie Breaking the Waves. To me, that film seemed to delight in the spectacle of a nubile child woman enduring endless rounds of sexual humiliation, like having to masturbate an aged stranger on a bus, all in the service of her husband, and all deemed to be okay because at the end of the movie, she gets to go to heaven. Now, I think this is really pernicious, misogynistic stuff, but that isn't how it plays to the film's numerous fans, men and women, who apparently find it moving and uplifting, nor to the BBFC, which passed it uncut on film and video. So why do these films inspire such polarised and opposite reactions? The answer is that although we may all watch the same film, we all see different films, films that are as individual as our own personal responses to them. And it's this that makes the practice of film censorship a nonsense. It's one thing for critics to argue amongst themselves about the relative virtues of Crash, but it's quite another when our censors cut 2 minutes of zombies clawing at bloody wounds out of the 18-rated Evil Dead in the belief that this will somehow make it less likely to deprave and corrupt. Of course, under the terms of the revised Video Recordings Act, all videos, even those rated only for adults, are now cut to make them suitable for viewing in the home, meaning safe for kids who might surreptitiously access them when their parents aren't looking. Now, this is the equivalent of watering down all alcohol available in off-licenses on the basis that you might be a lousy parent who allows their children open access to the drinks cabinet. But of course it also does no good, because even in its cut form, a movie like The Evil Dead is still going to upset children whose parents can't be bothered to monitor their viewing habits. And it's not just cutting and diluting which occupies the censors' time. When the mood takes them, they actually like to change the meaning of movies too. When John McNaughton shot this sequence for Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer, he specifically didn't want the audience to know straight away that the killers were watching a videotape of their crime. Instead, he wanted to implicate viewers in the killer's voyeurism. Now, this went down very badly with the censors, who not only cut down the attack — McNaughton's version is shown here on the left and the BBFC version on the right — they actually restructured the entire sequence, editing in from elsewhere a reaction shot of Henry and his accomplice watching the tape, thereby alerting the audience to what was going on and freeing them from the guilty realisation that they may be indulging in exactly the same foul pleasures as the film's anti-heroes. So where does this all stop? Should we re-edit D.W. Griffith's cinematic milestone Birth of a Nation so that it no longer glorifies the Ku Klux Klan? Should we ban Romper Stomper, which depicts gangs of Australian skinheads terrorising immigrants because some anti-Nazi organisations think it incites racial violence? Or should we accept, as George Orwell did, that if freedom of speech is to mean anything, it must be the freedom for people to say things which we don't want to hear? Well, that's what I think. But it's very hard to maintain freedom of speech in a culture which has become terminally infantilized. We've allowed the censors to view us all as children, and we've handed over the reins of responsibility for our viewing habits because we're not willing to accept that responsibility for ourselves. We've invited Big Brother into our homes and begged him to look after us and our kids. But of course, he can't. Films and videos cannot be made safe for everyone. The horror writer Ramsey Campbell once reported that the most frightening thing he'd ever seen was the image of a walking tree in a Rupert the Bear annual, which had caused him months of nightmares. Every year, children are reduced to floods of tears by the death of Bambi's mother in a scene which has haunted generations. Even though she dies off-screen, the story is so strong and this scene so powerful that many viewers imagine that they've witnessed something far more explicit than what's actually shown. The truth is that no matter what our censors do, art and literature will continue to inspire strange and baffling responses in people, and the removal of a few seconds from a movie here or the re-editing of a video there won't do anything except create a climate in which censorship is erroneously considered to be a valid and necessary operation. So what's a solution? Well, firstly, we need to accept the fact that the idea of policing the effect of movies at some kind of national level is impossible. We need to get beyond the outdated idea of obscenity and accept that there really is no such thing as a provable tendency to deprave and corrupt. The BBFC should restrict themselves to classifying and describing material, making cuts only when an offence has been committed in the production of a movie. And this is actually the one area in which British censors are ahead of the world, preventing the distribution of material which has involved the exploitation of children or animals, or for that matter adults, in its creation, viewing the sale of such material as accessory after the fact. This is the legitimate face of film policing, because it concentrates not on the indefinable subject of what a film means to its audience, but on the concrete factual issue of what that film did to its participants. But beyond that, we need to stop cutting and banning movies intended for adults. We need to seriously rethink our attitude about whose job it is to protect our children. We need to stop pretending that these are decisions that somebody else can make for us. And we need to open our eyes to the possibility of a future free from censorship.
Coming up, Harvey Keitel stars as a New York cop steeped in corruption and depravity. But can the hope for redemption save the bad lieutenant from himself? For Censored Weekend continues next.